A very warm welcome and good afternoon to everybody to our third inspiring chat of E.I.N.S, today co-hosted by EURASHE. My name is Raffaseder. I'm a member of the executive board of St. Pölten University of Applied Sciences and also the leading coordinator of our European University Alliance E.U.D.RES². And also the coordinator of E.I.N.S, the E.U.D.RES Entrepreneurship and Innovation Network for Smart and Sustainable Regions, which is funded by the European Institute of Innovation and Technology within the EIT's initiative to strengthen the innovation capacity of European higher education institutions. We have quite a lot of changes today, but we have a very interesting panel and some highly acknowledged experts in the field of smart specialization and the role of higher education institutions. And I want to introduce Karel Haegeman. He is the team leader for smart specialization at the European Joint Research Council, which did a lot of, I think, quite important research on these topics, and then is, of course, responsible for a lot of policies. Karel, thanks for joining us. And I go straight forward and ask you for your impulses on these topics.
Good afternoon. Thanks a lot. Yes. Thanks for having me here. Well, I'll try to, I don't know if you can share presentation from your side, because I have some technicalities here. So the idea is to give a brief overview of our activities related to smart specialization with a focus on higher education. So I'll take about 10 minutes or so and throw in a few ideas for discussion maybe. Unfortunately, I cannot stay longer for that discussion, but I hope at least that's useful. So so on higher education for smart specialization is one of the activities under the smart specialization platform, which also has been impulsed by John Edwards, who is also here around the table. So welcome, John. And has known a long history from 2016, and so we it's a collaboration between the Joint Research Center and DG EAC in the Commission, and work very much around case studies and trying to better understand stakeholder engagement and how the role of higher education in place-based innovation, but more generally also in innovation, can be upscaled, to say it sort of like this. And some of the projects here that will later be discussed also are the handbooks on higher education for smart specialization, but also the case studies from which Rostu was also, of course, one of the cases. If we look at in the next slide on the history, I think there's another one. Does it go well? Yeah, that one. This is the one. That's the history of the project, where you see we went to HES4, so it's a very long-standing project, basically building on a number of both national and regional case studies, analyzing good practices from all different sorts. In a minute, also present a bit some of a brief overview of what we learn, cutting across all these years and all these cases in a few key messages. But this is more or less the timeline of the work that leads to these key messages I'll bring. If we look at the next slide, yeah, this is how it looks like in the current setting on the HES4. We've had a long-standing collaboration with EIT. The JRC and EIT we have an MOU, memorandum of understanding, and we published also a report on how regional managing authorities and EIT KICS collaborate. But this activity now focuses also trying to involve universities within that collaboration. much stronger. So we have one activity that focuses on that, and also on the new instrument towards universities and how that can be better connected to regional innovation. There's an activity on IC Innovate where we try to mirror the tool from DG EAC on universities to see also how regions from their perspective can better involve universities in their regional innovation policies. Then we have activities with knowledge alliances, analytics on human capital and how human capital investments in territories are linked to the S3 story. And then we have an advisory group where both John and also the OECD are observers in the group. So on the next, a few messages here. Also on the lessons learned from the past case studies. I think we had 11 or so. And there's a publication upcoming on that. And if you look at in the next slide, if you look at the case studies, they're here. They're very different in terms of the approach, but also in terms of level of development, the type of level governments, the system, also the design of EDP, and especially also the policy mix, and that's the most important one, I think. And we can see, if you look at the next slides, there's kind of 4 dimensions on which the cases impact on innovation. First, on S3 and higher education institution governance, also on S3 implementation and the role of S3, learning together with partners, and also regional upgrading with skills development and alignment. More in detail, it's all spelled out in detail on the next slide. You see here how it's spelled out into specific categories of examples, and each one of them, with the cases, is linked to specific innovative practices more generally. So it offers kind of a framework of what universities can do in terms of innovation impact in different areas, building on the cases. So it's all spelled out in and every single example, also relates to several practices in several regions of the case studies. On the next point, also, it's basically an additional key message I want to bring, that there's a number of policy issues that frame a lot of the work that has been done under HES, and that, we also need to take consideration for the current development and also for the future of it. If you go to the next, I take 2 key ones. One is the communication on European strategy for universities, where actually universities, are addressed a key role in terms of contributing to the twin transition and supporting actually the implementation of the twin transition and play a central role in that. And secondly, also in the area of communication, which where universities are addressed a similar role, which is actually very ambitious. So what does it mean for, just a reflection, what does it mean for universities? We have a list here on the next slide, which, what does it mean in terms of funding models to explore, that focus more on innovation performance, also assessment frameworks that relate more to innovation impact, on expanding the stakeholder scope of universities on which they bring, what's the role of citizen science, role of experimentation, and finally also, how can universities contribute to transformative innovation, and where to choose, because so many things to choose from. So should universities have a smart specialization strategy, or or something similar. And finally, I like to point out that we also work on systemic transformation. We have an action that's related to partnerships in regions, where regions can develop a new kind of generation of strategies towards sustainability, where they look more at systemic views of innovation. And for this, we're testing a new approach, and we have an open call for regions to apply to test this methodology. I put the link here in the chat, and you can share the presentation and have a look at it. It's directed to regions, but it can involve also universities as partners and so on. So it would be interesting to also have a look at it, discussing the role of universities within this systemic transformation. Thanks a lot. I'm sorry, but I have to run. Apologies for that, but I have coinciding meetings now. So thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Karel, for this impulse and I think important insights to the ongoing work on GRC. I would once again like to apologize. Karel replaced his colleague, which was announced, and she's unfortunately on a sick leave. So he came in very short notice and has another important meeting. But I think it was an important first step to have this context about the role of and possible roles of higher education institutions in the field of smart specializations and the development of the regions. Now I want to hand over to John Edwards, who is more or less today in somehow a double role. On the one hand, he's the Secretary General of EURASHE, our co-host, and John is also an expert in the field of smart specialization and higher education, and he was also the co-author of this study about higher education for smart specialization, case study Lower Austria. John, I'm very pleased to have you here, and thanks a lot to EURASHE hosting this webinar with us together today. John, the floor is yours.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Hannes, for the introduction, and thank you for everyone who is here today. I hope it can also be, well, it is being recorded, and that it can be distributed also to others who weren't able to be here following it live today, because this is an interesting region, Lower Austria, and I am really pleased to share some of the results that we found in the JRC's case study that was conducted between the end of 2019 to the beginning of 2021. But before I do that, I would just take 2 minutes for your time, please, to introduce EURASHE, which I would have done before Karel, knowing that he had to leave. So of course, EURASHE is a European association representing all types of institutions, higher education institutions, that deliver somehow professionally orientated higher education. So many of them are University of Applied Sciences, such as UAS, St. Pölten, and the other ones in the region of Lower Austria. But there are many other types of institutions with similar objectives, polytechnics, university colleges, and even traditional universities that have a professional orientation in some of their courses. More than 600 universities actually somehow represented, if you include the national associations. So it's quite a wide scope of membership that we have. Just some promotion for the annual conference that will take place in Brussels on the 23rd and 24th of May. which fortunately, being in Brussels, it's easy to get some of the speakers from the European institutions, and there are several. The full program can be found on the website, but I just thought I would put those two panels there, which could be of interest, especially to the subject today. One on the European universities, in which E.I.N.S is involved, and also one on this subject on smart specialization and place-based research and innovation, in which, you know, the main Directorate Generals, of course DG Regio, but the others, DG EAC, which this HES project that Karel just introduced started, they will be there to talk about all the different initiatives, not only smart specialization, that somehow support higher education institutions in engaging with their regions and contributing to their regional priorities. We do have a lot of projects in EURASHE that we're involved in to different extents. We coordinate one on regional impact. So I just wanted to highlight that. It's called Uasi Map. We're halfway through, and it will be very interesting to have the result. It really maps how university applied scientists make a specific role in their regions, which is perhaps different to other types of higher education institutions and traditional research centres. And we're doing a process at the moment involving these institutions you can see on the right, where we're using on the one hand a self-reflection tool, and on the other hand actually a methodology developed also within the Commission on the regional innovation impact assessment of universities, using both those methods in order to analyse how UAS can make an impact in their regions. And we're going to have the results later in the year after a workshop in Portugal in June. So that was a bit about EURASHE and the broader context of what we do. Now I'll say a few words about the case study that was conducted in Lower Austria. And I should first say that although I'm named as an author, I had a fairly minor role in the overall work. Most of the work was done by Sibylle Reichard, who unfortunately can't be with us today, but she would have liked to. She undertook the research in the region, and the report was published about a year ago. I was managing this project in the JRC, as has been mentioned at the time, and the case studies were undertaken since 2005, 2015, 2016, in all those different regions. And Lower Austria was an unusual case. It was one of the last ones we did. And as I said, it started at the end of 2019 with a planned sort of workshop kickoff, let's say, event in Lower Austria, because the methods we used for the case studies were very much working with the stakeholders, action research, I think they call it, to understand what the case study should be about, sort of co-designing the research questions, and then being very participatory, including meetings in the region. So the one in Lower Austria said we launched at the end of 2019. We were just planning the kickoff meeting, and then of course we all know what happened in March 2020. So this case study was done entirely online. I've never even met in person the Sibylle. I've never met anyone from Lower Austria. I've never been there. So it was a challenge, but at the same time, we did get some very good results, I think. And I will tell you what they are. I mean, I know that we have a representative from the regional authority here, and she can tell you more, I think, about the region. Just from our report, I think a few things to point out. And by the way, oh yeah, this is the proper slide, because I have some comments on it. The map is there just to show you that where it's located in Austria. Of course, those from Austria will already know, but for everybody else, can see that it surrounds Vienna, and that's probably one of its strongest characteristics. But in comparison with other regions that surround their capital cities, I think Lower Austria has managed to, if I may say so, as an outsider, is managed to take advantage of that, rather than playing second fiddle to the central forces that any capital city has, whether that's by the spillover from the capital into the region, but also with its own institutional development. And the final remark on its geographical location is its position in Central Europe, being close to other important cities, the cooperation it has with its neighboring regions. So what we found out, at least in the context, was that the region is really an archetypal example of transition, because it was to more agricultural, whereas the urban center was in Vienna. But over the last 30 or 40 years, it really has turned in to more of a manufacturing-based economy. We can see that because there's been a high turnover of businesses, a lot of businesses being created, but also a lot that have ceased because of the economic transition. And it has grown faster, so as a spelling mistake, it's grown faster than the rest of the country, specifically in the manufacturing sector, and overall has higher growth rates in the last decade. And in terms of what we're talking about today, a large increase in spending on higher education, 23% in the last decade. But we found out, which I'm sure that Hannes and the other Silvo and the others from the institutions will smile about, there hasn't been the same increase in staff. Only a small percentage increase in staff, academic and non-academic staff, but a large increase in numbers of students and investment. There's also been 7,000 positions created in high knowledge services since 2008 in the region. So there's a bit of background. In terms of the actual institutions then, this table shows you that there is, I think, more than 50% of the students are in the UAS, in the Fachhochschulen. And this is obviously, compared to other regions, there's no traditional research-intensive universities like there is, for example, in Vienna. There's, as well as the UAS, there is a private university, some private universities, but also this lifelong learning university in Krems. But as I said, over 50% of them in the 4 UAS. And this compares to the national average of only about 20% of students in the other Austrian regions are from UAS. So it's a great example for our seminar series on smart UAS in smart regions. Smart specialization, although it's an academic concept, it's actually a lot about the money. Now, what's interesting is in Lower Austria, there's not as much money, European money we're talking about. Yeah? The European Regional Development Fund is the principal fund for smart specialization. And in less developed regions in the South and Central Eastern Europe, there are much higher ERDF allocations because they are less developed. So here, this is the amounts for Lower Austria in the previous programming period. And we can see it's actually, when you total it up, it's not a lot of money. But what we can see is that it has been concentrated largely, the money that has been available, on research and innovation, entrepreneurship, business-based innovation as well. And that can be a sign of the intention of the region. And by the way, the other Austrian programs which are larger than the European programs in the case of Austria. What's interesting, and this doesn't happen in all countries, that they have been largely designed in synergy with the European programs. So they've added money to programs that are funded also by the European funds. And in other regions and other countries, often you'll get lots of initiatives also competing for the European funds, and it's not healthy. You'll have national initiatives that are separate than the European initiatives. But in Austria, it seems as if the European funds have been working very harmoniously with the national funds. So now on Lower Austria itself, it is an advanced region in terms of regional innovation strategies. Many regions in Europe only had one for the first time in 2014, because that is when it was a requirement to have one, or what they call smart specialization strategies, in order to receive European funds. Before that, this was a voluntary process, and many other regions in Europe leading regions had regional innovation strategies. And we can see here in Lower Austria how that has developed. So for many advanced regions with already strategies, they said to the Commission in 2014, well, we've got one already. And so maybe it's not officially called a smart specialization strategy, but I think it's called the economic strategy in Lower Austria, that was used in order to fulfill the condition that was required to spend the ERDF on innovation of smart specialization. Now, what's the region spent the money on then? So this is coming from our report. That's why it's in German, a figure that I'm sure has been taken from somewhere else. So I apologize, there's no, I'm sure in the report there is a reference, but it is the policy mix of the strategy. And it's not the triangle doesn't show in terms of the highest amount of investments. I think it's just what shows it is at the tip. At the top of there is the technopoles. And that's been the flagship investment from the region in research and innovation. And they've been very successful in bringing the stakeholders together, in training as well, the clusters as well below that, in training people with new skills for new technologies. And this has been a stable policy, the technopoles. It happened before smart specialization, and they've continued. And I think that's a lesson, whereas other regions have not continued in the same path. They've swapped and changed on how they spend their money. But Lower Austria has taken a more consistent approach over time. Another success factor that we found was the good governance of research and innovation, because firstly, in terms of the national and regional levels, and then also within the region itself. I said in many countries, we see a lot of problems with what we call multi-level governance. So let's say this is European, national, and regional level. You will have national central governments who are not designing policies which are appropriate for the different regions they have in their own country. And in Lower Austria, there was guidelines, although the smart specialization framework was at a national level, because the program was at the national level, the ERDF program was at the national level, and therefore had to have a national strategy in order to meet the criteria. It's a small program relatively compared to the other countries. There were still strategic frameworks at regional level, and the national government provided guidelines on how to develop those strategies, and the money was spent from the national program via regional intermediaries. So that's the sort of national regional dimension. And then within the region, it's worth noting that the strategy and budget has principally been managed by the Department for Economy and Technology. Now, we see across Europe two broad ways of doing this. One is that the economic ministries are in charge, and the others, it's the science and research ministries. I must say, and Lower Austria is a good example of this, by far the most successful approach has been when the Ministry of Economy has been in charge. Because this is not, you know, there's a key word in the smart specialization lingo, which is entrepreneurial discovery process, finding the areas, the themes in which a region is good at. It's not called the academic discovery process for a reason. It is entrepreneurs, they're the ones who bring products to market. It's not universities. They're the ones that need to be supported in finding, working with the higher education sector, yes, but it's not a research policy. So I think that was a good move by Lower Austria. Well, I think continued its approach like that, apart from the fact that the higher education sector is managed nationally. And then that can be a factor, of course, why the economy department was in charge, but using the intermediary institutions that exist in Lower Austria, you know, when ECO+ is a business agency, but then these technopoles and clusters. I think the Department for Science and Research has had some budget, I understood from the report, but also supported the higher education institutions in the region, has supported them to bid for national programs and international as well. So there's been a good support, let's say there's been a good partnership between the HEIs and the region. And that good governance, which by the way is what the new condition for smart specialization in the new period is called. It's called good governance of smart specialization. Lower Austria is definitely, in our experience and compared to the other regions that we looked at in the E.I.N.S project, a good example. So conclusions, as I've just mentioned that there has been this strong partnership and good multi-level governance. The policy mix has been appropriate for a smart specialization strategy, concentrating on the business-based innovation. And one area that perhaps could have been strengthened more in Lower Austria, this is what the stakeholders said during the interviews, but now seems to be happening. Remember, this is already a couple of years ago since maybe some of the interviews happened, is that there needs to be more support for international cooperation. Since then, I think the E.U.D.RES alliance was successful, so that's already one step. But I think I would, and for the listeners in the region, another important initiative is the I3 initiative, which is centrally managed but ERDF funded, and it brings the quadruple helix partners together to apply for cooperation with other regions in Europe. There is a cutoff in April and another cutoff in October. So have a look at that opportunity to cooperate with other regions, but you have to come together. It's not just one partner in the region you can apply. You have to have all the elements of the quadruple helix involved. Okay, this is a bit wordy. I won't go through it all, but these were the recommendations. So we have long-term investment in infrastructures for the higher education sector, but also knowledge-intensive businesses. To grow its talent pool, or to continue to grow its talent pool, first of all, by expanding it to UAS, even though they dominate a region. Maybe this is just because proportionally, and that's been successful to work with the US, which are more regionally rooted. Cooperate, again, I just mentioned, internationally. And to design the R&D in clear complementarity with the national schemes. Then these innovation brokers or intermediaries that we spoke about, the ability to continue those strengthen them as a recommendation, and then finally to compare its own practice with international benchmarks, so to more learning from other regions to improve what was already quite an example of good practice from this project. So thank you very much, Hannes. I hope that's been enough to spark some debate, and forgive me, as I said, I'd never been to Lower Austria, and I wish I had, and I hope I will do one day. And I was really disappointed with the pandemic prevents me to do it, and therefore it's harder to pick some things up. Sibyl was the one who did most of that work, so if I've said anything wrong, forgive me for my ignorance. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, John, for this, for my opinion, very interesting overview about your report. And of course, you are invited to visit us in Lower Austria. I hope you will come as soon as possible. As for instance, there are at least 3 more universities of applied sciences in Lower Austria, which could be a member of EURASHE. So we are already, and as maybe some people know, I'm also a board member of EURASHE, and it would be very good to have some more colleagues from Austria as a member. Thanks. I think a very interesting thing, and I would like to go straight forward to discuss all these, or at least some of these topics. And I like to welcome Doris Agneter. Thanks a lot, Doris, for joining us today. Doris is the CEO of tecnet Equity. Tecnet Equity is, as we saw on one of the slides, one of the key innovation players and leaders here in Lower Austria. It provides capital as well as advice to both the businesses and industries, as well as to us as higher education institutions. And Doris is has been actively involved in all these developments, as John mentioned, from Lower Austria as a more agricultural country to now a lot of manufacturing and other industries and research innovation and so on. So a lot of expertise and experience. Doris, as John mentioned, I think we are can be proud that Lower Austria is a good example compared to some other European regions. To your opinion, and from your opinion and experience, what are the most important success factors on this journey during the last 1-2 decades, where also from my perspective, so many things happened, so many things improved? What is the story behind, and what are the most important success factors?
Thank you, Hannes, for this nice introduction. Welcome from my side as well. Yeah, as John already told us, Lower Austria is very focused on small and medium-sized companies. So it's not a country with very many large enterprises, but the economy is really based on SMEs. And the economic success of Lower Austria is, of course, based on its innovative leading companies, which in many cases are very highly specialized and often global leaders in their respective market niches. And Lower Austria looked very closely whether these innovation leaders come from. And in most of the cases, it starts with an innovative idea. And therefore, we had a very close look on our research institutions and on our universities where the students and scientists constantly develop innovative ideas. And for this reason, we developed a spin-off initiative, which is a key part of the economic strategy of Lower Austria at all. We see spin-offs as a very important part, transforming research, transforming scientific ideas into marketable products and services. And we think that these innovative companies have a significant impact on the competitiveness of Lower Austria and of national economies at all. But what's very special with Lower Austria, I think, on the one hand side, we have developed specific and very hands-on support programs at every stage of the developing of the company's journey, so to say. But what's on my point of view is even more important, and I think it's quite unique in Europe, is that we do provide a very complete chain of support, starting with a pre-incubator program we developed together with the University of Applied Sciences in St. Pölten. It's called Creative Pre-Incubator Program. Followed by a very specialized technology transfer program, where we support scientists and students on research institutions and universities to transform their research results into economic viable products. Followed by an incubator called Accent. And last but not least, we provide finance for startup companies. With tecnet, we do have a venture capital fund investing in startups at a very early stage. And what is very important here is these financings are not subsidies. They are on a mere commercial basis. So I think it's very important that startups have the possibility to work in the real world from the very beginning on. And this is accompanied by a very broad subsidy program of Austria, for whole of Austria. But I think it's one of the success factors is that we are not only building up these companies on subsidies, but also on a very commercial basis from the first day on.
Thank you, Doris, for this first insight about these success factors. You once again mentioned the importance of this, as John already mentioned, also this business-led innovation, really have this economic approach as an important factor from the very first stage. And I want to underline another thing, which I think definitely is, as far as I know, quite unique, that we really have this whole chain starting with the pre-incubation phase, and then also some kind of smaller competitions and so on for the students, and also for some academic staff members, and the whole spin-off strategy, and again, not just driven from an or not really driven from the academic point of view, but really coming from this economic point. And I think this is a thing which we also have to build on and continue. I would like to introduce Silvo Korez in our role. Thanks you very much for joining. Silvo is the head and responsible for the research and innovation services at Fachhochschule Wiener Neustadt. It's the biggest university of applied sciences here in Lower Austria, one of the biggest in Austria. And Silvo joined Fachhochschule Wiener Neustadt, I think 1.5 or 2 years ago, if I'm right, and he was in several other positions for other players in the eastern region of Austria, in case of research, innovation, and so on. So very warm welcome to Silvo. What is your point of view? Where is the role of Wiener Neustadt University of Applied Sciences in this context? What are your success factors, maybe best practices so far?
Okay, thank you for the introduction. The world is changing fast, as John and Karel mentioned, and it's changing for Lower Austria as well. So in a broader perspective, Austria was one of the countries that took the Lisbon agenda, if you remember, to become very competitive in a worldwide context very seriously. And is one of the maybe few countries that made at least the GDP figures on investment. In this context, Lower Austria positioned itself with the Technopole strategy in developing different focal points of development in a research manner. And the Fachhochschule Wiener Neustadt, so our university is located in 3 of the 5 technopoles. So we have campuses in Wieselburg, we have a campus in Tulln, in Wiener Neustadt, and so on. And what is changing fast? The sector itself, the university sector of applied science, is about 28 years old and looks back on a quite remarkable growth. And the growth was student-wise, of course, institution-wise. And now, in our perspective, this growth is shifting to other areas. What are the focal points of our work? Of course, education, higher education, then second, research, and third is the so-called third mission, which is inclusion of society and economic effects on the region, and so on and so forth. So one point is that the financing of universities of applied sciences is focused on education. So we have no block funding for research. Research funding is competitive, so most of the research we do, we have to fund competitive. And on the third mission, let's say, that is evolving fastly, the financing is somehow competitive as well. So what is changing in education? What stays the same? What is changing in the education? The things we have to educate are changing fast because it's shifting from this pillar-like education to more project approach work, let's say. So if you're a technician nowadays, you cannot only be educated in technical areas, you have to do project management, foreign language skills, and whatever. So there is a change in this knowledge sphere. Then research intensity is increasing fast for higher education institutions in general, but for for our sector especially. And this has a little bit a problem in itself, because if you want to develop a strategic research agenda solely on funding that is not clear in the longitude, you are somehow in a difficult position if you don't have block funding to develop it on a long range, let's say. In Lower Austria, this is a little bit, let's say, pillowed. We have a little bit of pillow because we have this technopole strategy, which is a strategy with funding in a longitude way. So the institutions and the higher education institutions and the University of Applied Sciences can lean on it. It will persist for a longer time. So this was the persistence. And in the third mission, we see that the focus in education is shifting from employability to self-employability. So startups, spin-offs, and all these spheres are getting more important. We have tools for that as well, as Doris mentioned, but the goal must be that the development should be strategically stable, which is still not so stable that we could say, okay, for the next 10 years, we're sure this will be able, so we can lean on it and go in this direction.
Thanks a lot, Silvo, for this first insights. I totally agree that we need this stability, especially on financing and resources. And John, I think this was also one of the recommendations you gave, if I got it right, that we need this also long-term approach. What are your reactions to Doris as well as Silvio so far, John?
Yeah, I think on the one hand, of course, there is a move to entrepreneurship and startups. And of course, that should be supported, and entrepreneurial education is very important for that. On the other hand, I think universities have a specific role in enterprise development, and that they can't do everything. So the ecosystem around it is the most important thing, and I think Silvo mentioned the technopoles, because the technopoles are involved with the higher education institutions, but it's not only the higher education institutions. And we shouldn't ask too much of universities. But the second theme that was mentioned on funding is that there needs to be a rethink by member states about how they fund these other activities, whether it's research or whether it's third mission. I don't really like the word third mission because it's almost less important than the other two, but the institution being looked at as a whole, when in the terms of the institutional block funding settlements, with the that could be looked at again, and not just funding education. I think, of course, there has to be a level of competition when it comes to research, but the sort of the regionally relevant research sometimes can have an excellent impact on the region, even if it doesn't win the competition, let's say nationally or European level. So we need to look at those two hands in hand. There is something which is not mentioned in the report, and maybe Austrian colleagues can clarify this, but there was something sort of like contracts between the national government and institutions on what they can deliver in terms of impact, regional impact, and that they would be paid based on those results. That suggests to me that it's more than education, but maybe I've got that wrong. I think it's something called location concept or something like that. Those type of funding models, I think, would make the most of the holistic contribution that the institutions can make in their regions.
Thanks, John. I would also put a second question for you. As Silvo already mentioned, the ongoing changes in higher education, and we need some new approaches in terms of content and methods and so on. And we have the EURASHE annual conference, which is about the next generation professional higher education. What is your point of view? What do we need in the education to support this transformation, the obviously necessary transformation of our economy, of our societies? What are the main aspects from your point of view?
Yeah, I think it's getting this balance right between technical, specialized knowledge and the horizontal skills. I think what companies often ask for are the horizontal competencies. So, you know, a lot of effort should be given to building those competencies. But at the same time, smart specialization is about priorities for a region. More vertical priorities, not necessarily in specific industrial sectors, but in areas of knowledge. And there needs to be a specialization also within the higher education system to have, you know, excellent contributions in specific areas. And, you know, the UAS should resist the temptation of becoming comprehensive universities and covering all fields. But at the same time, I said, strengthening these horizontal competencies, which companies, the soft skills that companies increasingly demand.
Right. I really like this idea of the smart specialization for higher education institutions. I think this is there's still maybe quite a long way to go because at least from my perspective, there was some new topics are coming on, and maybe 10, maybe 15 years ago, we started to speak about third mission, and then at that time, all institutions, higher education institutions, became the new experts for the third mission, and then we started to discuss about entrepreneurial education and everybody's involved in this, and I think we're not there yet that we have this kind of smart specialization within the field of higher education. Doris, from your point of view, when we talk about the role of the higher education institutions for this smart specialization, for the innovation processes within our region, where do you think are the most important strengths and also the weaknesses of our universities here in Lower Austria, and what do you think do we, Silvo and I, and also our colleagues in should work on? What can or what should we improve?
Yeah, I think I'd like to respond also to Silvo and John. I like very much the concept of relevant research for the region. I think we, of course, the universities should provide research results which are internationally competitive. But being relevant for the region does also imply cooperation with the business and with the companies, with the local companies. And I think there is one of the strengths in Lower Austria because of the technopoles. But there is a very far way to go, I think so. There are cooperation projects, but I think both parts, companies as well as research institutions, should be more open-minded for these corporations, and also be more open-minded that startups may evolve out of these new ideas, and all these keywords like open innovation and things like that. So not only looking for proprietary patterns being evolved for the research institutions or for the companies, but really looking to bring research results forward. That's one point. The other point, of course, I understand that it's very important to have a stability on the financing part, and that the universities can't do everything on their own. They can't be responsible for research, for teaching, and for startup ecosystems. The more important it is that the ecosystem around the universities is evolving and is stable and is existing. And one of the points I'd like to make is it is very important to have its own expertise in every research institution or in every university, but it's not really necessary to have its top experienced managers, so to say, in every and each university. Lower Austria is it's called a large country. It's not so easy for a large country to really join these forces, but I think it's we have some examples that this does work very well. That there are some institutions providing support for all the universities in Lower Austria, and on the other hand, there are experts and people being responsible for these topics on site, and this cooperation can even be strengthened. And the stability on finance, therefore, we of course need the commitment of the government that all these topics are crucial for a region, and then therefore it was very important for me to renew and set up this new spin-off initiative, which is not only an idea of some institutions like tecnet or E.I.N.S or the universities of applied sciences, but is also really part of the regional economic strategy. And I think that's a first step to bring in a bit of a stability, because then built on this strategy, there of course are programs started and they do have finance perspectives of many years, so that we don't have to jump from one year into the other and don't know what's coming next.
Thanks a lot, Doris. I would directly hand over to Silvo, and Doris mentioned the importance of the ecosystem and the strong interconnection and interaction between us as higher education institutions and the economy, and as was already mentioned, that most of the businesses in Lower Austria are small and medium-sized enterprises. This is, if we compare it also on international levels, not always are these the partners that our researchers are looking for. So of course we have to do quite a lot to really interact with our ecosystems. What are you doing in Wiener Neustadt and on your different campuses? The technopoles mentioned quite a lot, but what are your institutional activities in regard to your innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystems?
Yes, if you look at research on a broader perspective, let's say in the last decades there was a lot of discussion about excellence. In my opinion, excellence is only a rephrasing of the winner takes it all. So you have small differences in the situation, and if you have huge differences in output. So if you are the first, you have the patent. If you're the second, you don't get anything. So in Austria, there was a lot of debate of it as well. And in Lower Austria, there was established an institution of excellence. And we did this, but now the pendulum is going in a different direction. The different direction, I would say, is phrased like citizen science and other terms, open access policies, and so on. So we have in Lower Austria, we have this excellence, but we have also the opportunity, and we are very happy about this, to experience new methods of this citizen science approach with a new makerspace we have. We're open to the public. You can do all the new technologies, and both in research, we need both. We need excellence, but as you know, it's mathematically impossible to have excellence only. This is not everybody can be above average. This is statistically clear. This is a psychological misleading situation. So we need methods and possibilities to increase involvement of society into research, to include regions into our thinking, and to benefit in our research from the ecosystem we are rooted in. Somehow, these ideas are already there. We have the possibility for funding for it, but it's not common practice, let's say. Because the excellence pendulum that should cover everybody is still over our heads, let's say, although in several aspects it makes no sense. To learn about these things, that involvement of regional companies is very beneficiary when you are looking at innovation. Because innovation is not only new to the world, it's new to the region as well. So if you go into economic development, new to the region is often more important than new to the world. And to have this spirit that this is important for the region, but I think we are on a good way.
Thanks, I think is a very important aspect in this discussion about excellence. And if I got you right, there's on the one hand this kind of excellence concerning all the research content, but it's also some kind of excellence which is necessary in terms of methodology. And you mentioned citizen science, and also somehow translating research, making them new things for the region, and also have this kind of specialization in these fields. Doris, I want to ask you one more specific question about the research to value program. I think it's also about, on the one hand, opening the universities and more or less helping, supporting the researchers to make value out of their research. Maybe you could explain just in a nutshell what is this support program about, and what are the experiences so far also in these terms of Silvo, Silvo said, and so on.
We started with this research to value program, I think 6 years ago. It's a technology transfer program. What we are doing here is we are working with all the research institutions, universities of applied sciences in Lower Austria. And we are working there with the scientists and also with startups and students, but mainly with the scientists. Our aim is to broaden the perspective of the researchers, not only to look for excellent research results and publications, but also for looking to bring these results to value. This value can be an economic value, but this value can also be an impact on society. So it's a very broad perspective of value. We are starting with various programs. We do have coaching sessions. So on the one hand, we provide knowledge on IP, on how to talk to partners to economic partners like SMEs, how even to make a cold call if you want to see would this be a viable product. We have so-called Pathfinder days where it's a bit of design thinking, just to elaborate on the ideas. How could you bring your idea into a product, but not only what can be done next week, but on a very also mid-term perspective. So we start even in the phase where they set up their research proposals for funding perspectives, for instance, and just to look a step further, how could you make an impact with your research results, even before these results are given? And what are the prerequisites that have to be done that an economic transition is possible? That's very important in life sciences, but also in other areas. And if the researchers are really want to bring us in a spin-off or in a startup, or want to license or collaborate with some companies, we also help them in negotiating these contracts, but not on mainly not on a competitive basis, but on a win-to-win basis, because in most cases it's not the next unicorn you will create. As Silvo said, it's not only everything is not the top, but there can be very, very good results and even outcomes if small company is working together with research institution, and if both sides are only optimizing their outcome, nothing is done at all. But if they are working together and looking for a collaborative idea, very good projects can be realized. Yeah, what we also do is we try to bring to foster the network activities between the research institutions on the aspect of business development and technology transfer. We do have trainer programs. We do have it's called empowerment meetings where they can exchange their experiences and learn from each other. And yeah, that's this program in a nutshell. And I think it's yeah, it's quite successful, and we have we work together with about 20 research institutions in Lower Austria.
Thanks a lot for this explanation. I think research to value is really pioneering, at least in Austria, and I think also in at least in some aspects in Europe. What we learned in St. Pölten UAS through research to value is, at least from my management perspective, that we also have to go somehow out of the way. We should not act as some kind of a doorkeeper. In the very beginning, we somehow tried. We had our research office, we had our management, and we said, okay, there is now colleagues from Tecnet Equity are coming, so we have to know if they want to speak with our researchers and so on. We realized that all these things work the better if we do not know, and if your colleagues go more or less straightforward directly to our researchers and so on. And now, of course, after quite a long collaboration, we, I think, have this also mutual trust and really work together. And a second important learning was that we do not have research and innovation as a chain, starting with the proposal, and then there is the research work and the publication, maybe a patent, and so on, and then we think about the transfer and the innovation. But I think tech transfer really has to start with the proposal, as you mentioned quite a few minutes ago. John, time is rising quite fast, but I want to raise one more of your recommendations, and it was about internationalization. So maybe you can talk a little more about these aspects and the possibilities you observe. What should be done besides our European University E.U.DRES² and the E.I.N.S project, which of course tries to connects to some other European regions.
Yeah. Okay. Well, obviously it's not easy to internationalize. It is an international competition in a way, if you like. The only way you'll succeed is I think working together as a region, and to identify what you're good at and how you can fit into those international value chains. So, of course, the E.U.DRES is the European University Alliance. It's a good way of cooperating in higher education, and I think the initiative itself is still to be developed, the objectives of the initiative, and what these European universities will turn into. But I think more in terms of the report, what we're talking about the smart specialization strategy and internationalization, would be that you don't make everything in a region. You don't make, I would say, you don't make the whole product in a region. You may make a part of a product. You may make the wheels for a car, rather than the whole car. So you have to see what you're good at and how to cooperate with, to give opportunities for the firms, especially when it comes to SMEs. That was mentioned by Doris, not having the capacity to be able to fit into those value chains, would be to see how you can actually act as a promoter of the region internationally. And so the EU does have some schemes. I mentioned the I3 interregional innovation investments, it's called, that's what it stands for. That is one, and it is about the region working together. But, you know, let's say, I would say it summarizes the separation and the internationalization of the university. Universities can act as focal points to bring in external knowledge into the region, and that is one role. But when looking at the contribution of universities to a region, it shouldn't just be about what the university can do on its own as a supplier. You know, it's about linking into the demand that there is for the knowledge, and not just assume that if they supply skills and knowledge, it will be used. Therefore, you know, working with firms, but then to see what their international position is, and then taking a step back and providing those skills and knowledge that is required for the firms to be able to internationalize. So that'd be, as I said, not the easiest thing to orchestrate, but there would be the best benefit for the region.
Thanks, John. Silvo, what are your experience in this context? Internationalization, research, innovation, education. How is the interrelation between these topics?
Yes, I want to come back to this perspective of growth. So the classical growth is now shifting to functional growth. So we are growing not so much in physical terms and student terms. We're growing in different functionalities, and one of these functionalities is international. So we have to manage simultaneously regional development activities and activities on a really high international level. Let's say our subsidiary FOTEC is doing projects with ESA and NASA on a really global level. What are the difficulties with it? That you have in one institution, and it's our institution, a broad variety. You have these regional aspects, and you have internationalization on high-tech, very international level. So this puts a lot of stress on management because you have a broad variety of things to manage. There are different indicators you measure. You have different measurement scales. You have different success scales. You have different approaches. You have different financial needs. You have different organizational needs, and these to somehow package in one institution is not so easy. But this is a growth task. It's not so easy to become a University of Applied Sciences with 4,500 students when you start 28 years ago with a couple of dozens. So this growth dynamics in figures and room and organization are shifting to functionality dimensions, and with the tools, the people, and it is possible one can be a proud regional provider, and we are a proud regional provider of higher education, and one can be punctually on a top international level, but takes a lot of work.
Thanks, Silvo. Doris, what is your opinion? How important is internationalization for Lower Austria?
Yeah, it's one of the key elements, and therefore what we do is for instance, we also work together with our incubator with the ESA, as you already mentioned, and we are in a very close cooperation with the University of Wiener Neustadt. And for instance, we also do have a cooperation with CERN, and this CERN cooperation is insofar very interesting because Our incubator accent is the Austrian national coordinator for all the CERN startup activities. And they are called CERN-X, and there are different CERN-X in different European countries. And so the collaboration is not only with these international research institutes, but also with other business incubation centers and thus research centers throughout Europe. And we have one program, it's called CERN², and their regional US students can go to CERN and work for 3 months on business ideas based on CERN technologies. And then they can compete within other regional peaks. And I think that's a possibility to have an international cooperation, not only on a research basis, but also on a business and students basis. And that's a bottom-up approach, which works quite fine, I think so.
Thanks a lot, and I think it's also another important learned lesson. We need this kind of bottom-up approaches, although, and it was mentioned, the importance of governance and management structures, but we need the people who really drive the things bottom-up and come up with these approaches where really education, innovation, research are really integrated, and also higher education and businesses, regional aspects as well as international ones are combined in a good way. We are almost at the end of our discussion. I just want to have a very last short message from all of you to our listeners and the collaborators. Whatever you would give us for today, and I would like to start with you, John. What is your last message you would like to put on the floor?
Yeah, all I'd say is it's very difficult to talk about regional development in a webinar, isn't it? I mean, it's that's one of the things I've just been thinking. You know, they say the internet is the death of distance, but it is the relationships between the people in the region that shape some of these dynamics. We lack that in the pandemic. I think that while regions are more connected, they've suffered. The dynamic, the knowledge exchange has suffered. And I think we need to think more about what the impact has been from that, so it's not really related to the report itself or the case of Lower Austria. It's more a general comment. I can see there's lots of interesting things going on in the region. We need to know more about the UAS, exactly what they are doing, and we need more concrete examples than I think we discussed today. It's been a very broad discussion, although interesting. And let's work together more to come up with some concrete projects. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Silvo.
We have spoken now a lot of difficulties in regional development. I want to quit with some positive remarks. We can do it, and we will do it, and it's doable. And that's my last remark. Nothing more to say. We discussed a long time about difficulties, but if we have a forum to speak about them, a common knowledge of what the difficulties are, we can overcome them, and we can do it.
We can do it. That's a good aspect. And Doris?
Yeah, and I think we should really focus on success stories. We do have all all the regions do have regional success stories, and these should be focused on, and then we do have the strengths and are happy to work on the next ones.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all the participants. Thanks for joining. Thanks to EURASHE for co-hosting this session. Thanks to my colleagues at St. Pölten University of Applied Sciences and from our European University, E.I.N.S, and the E.I.N.S project, as mentioned, supported by the European Institute of Innovation and Technology. A lot of next things are coming up during the next few weeks and months. We mentioned the EURASHE annual conference in Brussels in mid of May. Check out the website, join the conference about next generation professional and higher education. I think it will be a very good event. Check out our website, E.I.N.S.EU, and also the E.I.N.S websites, and I hope you will join us at one of the next events and occasions, and maybe we can have some kind of a follow-up of this meeting, as John and also the other colleagues mentioned. I think we have to learn from the good practices, and I think there are a lot of things to share, and John has to come to Lower Austria anyway. So maybe we can have an opportunity in Wiener Neustadt, St. Pölten, or even with our colleagues in Krems. So a lot of things to do, but we will make it, as Silvo said. Thanks a lot for today. Have a good evening, and I hope to meet you all soon. See you soon. Bye-bye.